March 15th, 1887. When ranch hand Colt Brennan found the half-dead woman collapsed in the canyon, bruised and barely breathing, he thought he was saving just another lost soul. But the moment he lifted her torn shirt to check for injuries, he saw the branding iron scar burned deep into her skin, a mark that made his blood run cold, because he recognized that symbol. What kind of monster would brand a woman like cattle? And why was the same man now riding toward his ranch with a dozen armed men? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Colt Brennan's back as he guided his mare through the narrow passage of Devil's Canyon. He'd been tracking strays for the better part of 3 hours, and the heat was starting to make him question whether those 2 missing heifers were worth the trouble. The canyon walls rose steep on either side, casting jagged shadows across the red dirt path. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost mistook it for the wind whistling through the rocks. A moan, human. Colt pulled his horse to a stop, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. Out here you learned quick that trouble came in all forms. He dismounted slowly, his boots crunching against the gravel as he followed the sound around a massive boulder. What he found made his stomach drop. A woman lay crumpled against the canyon wall, her dress torn to ribbons, dark hair matted with blood and dust. Her skin was pale as death itself, lips cracked and bleeding. She couldn't have been more than 25, but the way she lay there, broken and still, she looked ancient with suffering. "Ma'am?" Colt dropped to his knees beside her, his rough hands hovering uncertainly. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, just barely, and a whisper escaped her lips. "Please, just let me die here." The words hit Colt harder than any punch he'd ever taken. He'd seen desperate people before, seen men at the end of their rope, but something about the way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so final, chilled him to his core. "Not happening," he muttered, already assessing her injuries. Her left arm was bent at an unnatural angle, definitely broken. Deep cuts crisscrossed her hands and forearms like she'd been dragged through barbed wire. But it was the fever burning through her skin that worried him most. Infection had already set in. As gently as he could, Colt slid his arms beneath her to lift her. She cried out, a raw sound of agony that echoed off the canyon walls. That's when her torn dress shifted, revealing her shoulder and upper back. Colt froze, burned into her skin. Raised and angry even through the infection was a brand. Not just any brand, a perfectly executed symbol of a coiled rattlesnake wrapped around a dollar sign. The edges were precise, professional. This hadn't been some drunken accident or crude torture. Someone had branded her with the same care a rancher would mark his prize cattle. His hands started shaking. He knew that brand. Every man, woman, and child within 300 miles knew that brand. It belonged to Silas Wardle. Silas Wardle, the richest man in the Arizona Territory. Silas Wardell, who owned half the silver mines in the region and had politicians in his pocket, like loose change. Silas Wardell, who smiled like a saint in church every Sunday, while rumors swirled about what happened to people who crossed him. The woman in Colt's arms stirred, her eyes opening just enough to see him staring at her brand. Shame flooded her face, a shame so profound it seemed to hurt her worse than all her physical wounds combined. "Damaged goods," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's what he called me. Damaged goods that needed to be marked so everyone would know." Rage exploded in Colt's chest, hot and fierce. He'd seen cruelty before. Hell, he'd lived through plenty of it himself, but this was something else entirely. This was calculated, deliberate, evil dressed up in expensive suits and silver-tipped boots. "Listen to me," Colt said, his voice rough but steady. "I don't know what happened to you, and I don't know who you are. But I know this. Nobody deserves this. Nobody. You understand me?" She didn't respond, her eyes already sliding shut again as consciousness slipped away from her. Colt stood carefully, cradling her against his chest as he walked back to his horse. She weighed almost nothing, like a bird with broken wings. He managed to mount up while holding her, settling her across his lap as gently as possible. Every step the horse took made her whimper, even unconscious. The ride back to the Brennan Ranch took 45 minutes, and Colt spent every second of it thinking. His ranch was small. Just him, his younger sister Elena, and 2 hired hands who helped during cattle season. They kept to themselves, stayed out of other people's business, and survived by working harder than anyone else in the territory. Bringing this woman home was dangerous. If she really had escaped from Silas Wardle, then Wardle would be looking for her. And when men like Silas Wardle lost something they considered their property, they didn't stop looking until they found it. But leaving her to die wasn't an option Colt could live. With the ranch house came into view, a modest wooden structure with a wraparound porch and a barn that had seen better days. Elena was out front, hanging laundry on the line. She was 19, tough as nails, with their mother's dark eyes and their father's stubborn streak. She looked up at the sound of hoofbeats, and her eyes went wide when she saw what Colt was carrying. "Dear God," Elena breathed, already running toward them. "What happened?" "Found her in Devil's Canyon," Colt said, dismounting with practiced care. "She's in bad shape, Elena, real bad. I need you to prepare the spare room and heat water." "Lots of it." Elena didn't waste time with questions. She'd grown up on the frontier. She knew when to act and when to ask. She sprinted for the house while Colt carried the unconscious woman inside. The spare room was small but clean, with a simple bed and a window that looked out over the desert. Colt laid her down as gently as he could, then stepped back, suddenly aware of how improper this all was. A strange woman, unconscious, in his house. Elena rushed in with towels and a basin of water, already rolling up her sleeves. "Tell me what you know," she said, her voice calm and professional. Their mother had been a nurse before she died. Elena had inherited her steady hands and cool head in crisis. Broken arm, multiple lacerations, fever from infection, Colt rattled off. "But Elena, there's something else." He carefully turned the woman's shoulder to reveal the brand. Elena's face went white, then red with fury. "That's Wardell's mark." "I know. Colt, if he finds out she's here—" "I know," Colt repeated, his jaw set. "But we can't turn her away." "We won't." Elena looked at her brother for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then we'd better make sure she lives. Because if Silas Wardell comes looking for her and she's already dead, he'll kill us just for wasting his time." As Elena began cleaning the woman's wounds, Colt stood by the window watching the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. Beautiful and deadly, just like everything else in this territory. He thought about the woman lying broken in his spare room, about the brand on her skin and the words she'd whispered, "damaged goods." Somewhere out there, Silas Wardell was probably already organizing a search party. Men with guns and no conscience looking for a piece of property that had escaped. Colt's hand drifted to his revolver again. Let them come. 3 days passed, and the woman still hadn't opened her eyes for more than a few seconds at a time. Elena had worked miracles. She'd set the broken arm, stitched the worst of the cuts, and fought the fever with cool compresses and whatever herbal remedies their mother had taught her. But the infection was stubborn, clinging to life as fiercely as the woman herself seemed to be slipping away from it. Colt found himself spending more time than he should in that spare room, sitting in the old wooden chair by the window, watching her breathe. He told himself he was just keeping watch, making sure she didn't take a turn for the worse when Elena needed rest. But the truth was something else entirely, something he didn't quite understand yet. On the 3rd night she started talking in her sleep. "No more. Please, no more." Her head thrashed on the pillow, sweat soaking her hair. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." Colt leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. The words came faster now, tumbling out in a panicked rush. The little girl saw. She saw what you did to him. Her breathing became ragged, desperate. "You can't kill a child, please." "Not her too." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Colt's blood went cold. Whatever this woman had witnessed, whatever had led to her being branded and left for dead, it was worse than he'd imagined. "She's running again," Elena said softly from the doorway. She carried a fresh basin of water and more clean cloths. "Been doing it all day? Whatever demons she's running from, they won't let her rest." Colt stood, letting his sister take his place by the bedside. "You need sleep, Eleanor. You've been at this for 3 days straight. So have you." She dipped a cloth in the cool water and placed it on the woman's forehead. "Miguel and Thomas are asking questions. They've noticed you haven't been checking the cattle. Haven't been doing much of anything but hovering around this room." Miguel and Thomas were the 2 ranch hands. Good men who'd worked the Brennan spread for years. But good men still talked, and talk had a way of traveling in the territory. "What did you tell them?" "That we found an injured woman, and we're helping her recover." Eleanor's dark eyes met his. "They're not stupid, Colt. They've seen the brand. They know what it means. And they're scared." She wrung out the cloth and placed it back in the basin. "Thomas wants to know if we're going to have trouble. Miguel hasn't said anything, but I caught him checking his rifle twice today." Colt moved back to the window, staring out at the darkness. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the desert. "Tell them if they want to leave, I understand. I'll pay them through the end of the month." "They're not leaving," Elena said. "But they need to know what we're dealing with here." "Hell, Colt, I need to know what we're dealing with. Who is she? What did she do to Silas Wardell that made him do this to her?" Before Colt could answer, the woman's eyes snapped open. They were green, the color of spring grass after rain, and filled with such raw terror that Colt instinctively reached for his gun. "Where—" Her voice cracked, broken from disuse and screaming. "Where am I?" Elena moved quickly, placing a gentle hand on the woman's good shoulder. "You're safe. You're at the Brennan Ranch. My brother found you in Devil's Canyon 3 days ago. You've been very sick." The woman's eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail, calculating. Colt recognized that look, the look of someone who'd learned the hard way that safety was temporary and trust was a luxury that could get you killed. Her gaze landed on Colt, and something flickered across her face. Recognition? No, not quite. More like she was trying to figure out if he was another threat she needed to run from. "You saw it," she whispered. It wasn't a question. "The brand?" "Yes," Colt said simply. "No point in lying." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, though it turned into a cough that made her wince. "Then you know what I am. Damaged goods. Property of Silas Wardell. Except I'm not even good property anymore. I'm the property that ran away." "You're not property," Elena said firmly. "You're a person. And whatever happened to you, whatever you're running from, you're safe here." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back furiously. "You can't help me." "Nobody can help me. And by keeping me here, all you're doing is painting targets on your own backs." "Let us worry about that," Colt said. He pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. "What's your name?" She hesitated, and for a moment Colt thought she wouldn't answer. Then so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "Iris. Iris Hartley. Well, Iris Hartley, I'm Colt Brennan. This is my sister Elena, and like she said, you're safe here." "Safe," Iris repeated the word like it was in a foreign language. "I haven't been safe since I was 16 years old. That's when my father gambled away everything we had, and then blew his brains out in the barn. Left me and my mother with nothing but debts." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her expression soft with understanding. "What happened then?" Iris closed her eyes, but the story came anyway, like poison she needed to purge. "Wardell owned the note on our land. He came to collect, found my mother and me trying to figure out how we'd survive the winter. He made an offer, work in his house, pay off the debt through service. My mother was sick, couldn't do much physical labor, so I went." Colt felt his jaw tightening, already knowing where this story was headed. At first, it was just cleaning, cooking, regular housework. But Wardell, he noticed me, started finding excuses to be wherever I was, started touching, just little things at first. A hand on my shoulder, standing too close. Then one night, she stopped, swallowing hard. I fought him off, broke his nose with a candlestick. Probably would have killed me right there if his wife hadn't heard the commotion. His wife knew. Elena's voice was sharp with disgust. She knew. Everyone knew. But Silas Wardell doesn't face consequences for anything he does. Instead, he came up with a different punishment. Iris's hand drifted unconsciously to her shoulder, to the brand hidden beneath her nightgown. He had 3 of his men hold me down in his study, heated up his branding iron in the fireplace, said if I was going to act like a wild animal, I should be marked like one. Said it would remind me and everyone else exactly what I was worth. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Iris's ragged breathing. That wasn't the worst part, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. The worst part came 2 weeks later. Wardell's business partner, a man named Edgar Finch, he came to the house drunk, started bragging about how he'd cheated a family out of their mining claim. Killed the father when he refused to sign. Said it was easy, said Wardell had taught him that people like that don't matter. Colt leaned forward. What did you do? Nothing. I was in the hallway, heard every word. Tried to slip away before they noticed me, but Edgar's daughter was there, a little girl, maybe 8 years old. She'd followed her father, heard everything too. Edgar saw her, saw me. The look on his face. Iris shuddered. I knew he was going to kill us both. So I grabbed the girl and ran. Jesus, Elena breathed. We made it to the stables. I put her on the fastest horse and told her to ride to the sheriff in Prescott, tell him everything she'd heard. Then I took another horse and rode the opposite direction, hoping they'd follow me instead of her. Iris opened her eyes, meeting Colt's gaze directly. They did. Chased me for 3 days. Finally caught up to me in Devil's Canyon. Beat me, threw me around like a rag doll. Edgar wanted to kill me right there, but Wardell said no, said the desert would do it for them, and it would hurt more. Said leaving me to die slow was better than a quick bullet. Colt felt rage burning through his veins, hot and fierce. The girl, did she make it to Prescott? I don't know. Iris's voice broke on the words. I don't know if she's alive or dead. I don't know if anyone believed her. All I know is that Wardell and his men think I'm dead somewhere in that canyon. And when they find out I'm not, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Elena stood, squaring her shoulders in that way she did when she'd made up her mind about something. Then we don't let them find out. We keep you hidden, we get you healthy, and we figure out what comes next. You don't understand, Iris said desperately. Wardell owns this territory. He owns the sheriff, the judge, probably half the ranchers around here. There's nowhere to hide that he won't eventually find me. Colt stood too, his decision made. Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But right now, you need rest, and you need to heal. Everything else can wait. Iris looked between the two of them, these strangers who were risking everything for her, and for the first time in years, something like hope flickered in her chest. It was a dangerous feeling. Hope could get you killed just as surely as fear could. 2 weeks crawled by, and Iris grew stronger each day. The fever broke on the 5th day. By the 7th, she could sit up without Elena's help. By the 10th, she was insisting on getting out of bed despite everyone's protests. The woman who'd whispered, "Just let me die," in Devil's Canyon, was being replaced by someone with fire in her eyes and steel in her spine. Colt watched the transformation from a distance, trying not to notice how the morning light caught in her auburn hair, or how her laugh, rare as it was, sounded like music he hadn't heard in years. "You're staring again," Elena said, catching him watching Iris through the kitchen window. She was outside on the porch, sitting in the rocking chair with her arms still in a sling, watching the sunrise paint the desert gold. "I'm keeping watch," Colt replied, pouring himself coffee. That's what you've been calling it." Elena grinned. "Miguel thinks you're smitten." Thomas agrees. "I tried to defend you, but honestly, big brother, they might be right." Colt felt heat creep up his neck. "She's been through hell. The last thing she needs is someone looking at her like she matters. Like she's more than what Wardell branded her as." Elena's voice softened. "I've seen the way she looks at you too, you know. When you're not watching, like she can't quite believe you're real." Before Colt could respond, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. Fast hoofbeats, urgent. Both siblings moved immediately. Elena grabbed the rifle from above the door while Colt drew his revolver, moving to the window. Iris had already disappeared from the porch. Smart girl, knowing when to make herself scarce. The rider came into view. Sheriff Dalton Kemp, his badge glinting in the morning sun. He was alone, which was either a good sign or a very bad one. Colt opened the door, keeping his gun hand-free but not threatening. "Sheriff, early for a social call." Kemp was a weathered man in his 50s, with grey in his mustache and tired eyes that had seen too much. He dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. "Colt, Eleanor, mind if I come in? Got some questions that need answering." "Questions about what?" Colt asked, not moving from the doorway. The sheriff's gaze flicked past him into the house, searching. "About a missing woman, name of Iris Hartley. Last seen 2 weeks ago, when she assaulted Silas Wardell and kidnapped his business partner's daughter. There's a reward for information leading to her capture. $500. Colt kept his expression neutral. "That's a lot of money for a missing woman." "It's a lot of money for a dangerous criminal," Kemp corrected. "Wardell says she's unstable, violent, could be a threat to anyone who crosses her path." He paused. "You haven't seen anyone matching that description, have you? Woman in her mid-20s, reddish-brown hair, about 5'5". "Haven't seen anyone," Colt said flatly. Kemp studied him for a long moment, and something complicated passed across the sheriff's face. "Colt, I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. Your daddy was a good man. You're a good man. So I'm going to give you some advice as a friend." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you had seen this woman, if she had somehow ended up on your property, the smart thing, the only thing, would be to turn her over. Wardell's not the forgiving type." "I appreciate the advice, Sheriff," Colt said carefully. "But like I said, I haven't seen anyone." Kemp's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just nodded. "All right then. But Wardell's got men searching every ranch, every town, every canyon from here to the Mexican border. If she's alive, they'll find her eventually. And anyone helping her—" He let the threat hang in the air. After the sheriff rode away, Colt found Iris in the barn, hiding behind the hay bales. She was trembling, her good hand clutched around a pitchfork like a weapon. $500, she said bitterly. "That's what I'm worth. My life, my truth, everything I witnessed. $500. Colt took the pitchfork gently from her hands and set it aside. "You're worth more than all the money in Wardell's silver mines combined. Don't let him make you believe otherwise." Iris looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, tears spilled down her cheeks. Not the angry tears of someone who'd given up, but the painful tears of someone who was trying desperately to hold on. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. All I've brought you is danger and trouble. Maybe I'm tired of men like Wardell thinking they can do whatever they want to whoever they want," Colt said. "Maybe I'm tired of good people looking the other way because it's easier than standing up. Or maybe," he paused, surprised by his own honesty, "maybe you matter to me. Even if I can't quite explain why yet." The space between them felt charged, electric. Iris reached up with her good hand and touched his face, her fingers trembling against his stubbled jaw. "Colt Brennan, you're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both," he admitted. The moment was broken by Miguel running into the barn, his face pale. "Boss, we got a problem." "Big problem." They followed him to the south pasture, where Thomas was waiting with a grim expression. Written in the dirt, carved deep with what looked like a knife, was a message. "We know she's here. 5 days. Give her up or burn." Iris read the words and went rigid. "They're going to kill you all. Because of me. I have to leave. Tonight. I'll head south, try to make it to Mexico." "No," Colt said firmly. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." He turned to Miguel and Thomas. "How do you two feel about a fight?" Miguel cracked his knuckles. "He'd been itching for one since we saw that brand on Miss Iris's back." "Didn't sit right, boss." "None of this sits right," Thomas nodded agreement. "My daddy always said a man's measured by what he does when doing the right thing costs him something. Reckon this is one of those times." Iris looked at the three men, staring back at her with determination in their eyes. Then at Elena, who joined them, rifle already in hand. "You're all insane," she whispered. "Probably," Elena agreed cheerfully. "But we're committed to it now. So here's what we're going to do. We have 5 days before Wardell makes his move. That gives us 5 days to prepare, 5 days to fortify, and 5 days to figure out how to turn this from his fight into ours." Colt looked at the message carved in the earth one more time. 5 days. In 5 days, everything would change. Lives would be risked. Blood would likely be spilled. The easy thing would be to give Iris up, take the safe road, survive to see another sunrise. But Colt Brennan had never been much for easy. That night, as they sat around the dinner table making plans, Iris caught Colt's eye across the lamplight. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." He nodded once, a promise passing between them that needed no words. Whatever came in 5 days, whatever Wardell threw at them, they'd face it together. Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain and gunpowder. A storm was coming in more ways than one, and in his mansion 15 miles away, Silas Wardell sat in his study, staring at a map of the territory with pins marking every ranch, every hideout, every place his runaway property might be hiding. His finger stopped on one pin in particular, the Brennan Ranch. He smiled, cold and calculated, and reached for his whiskey. "Found you," he whispered to the empty room. The clock on his wall ticked toward midnight. 5 days were about to become the longest 5 days of everyone's lives. Day 1 of the 5 days dawned with purpose. Colt stood in the center of the ranch yard at first light, surveying his property with new eyes. The Brennan Ranch had always been modest. A house, a barn, a few outbuildings and pastures that stretched toward the mountains. Defensible, not particularly, but they had 5 days to change that. "All right," he called out to the assembled group. Miguel and Thomas stood ready, tools in hand. Elena had her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up. Iris stood slightly apart, still favoring her healing arm, but with determination written across her face. "We're going to turn this place into a fortress," Colt continued. "Miguel, Thomas, I need you to reinforce the barn doors with extra lumber. Make sure there's no way to burn us out easily. Elena, inventory every weapon we have, every bullet, every rifle. Figure out what we're working with." "What about me?" Iris asked. Colt turned to her. "You know Wardell. You know how he thinks, how he operates. I need you to help me figure out how he'll come at us." They spent the morning working in coordinated chaos. The sound of hammering echoed across the property as Miguel and Thomas fortified every entrance. Elena discovered they had 3 rifles, 4 revolvers, and enough ammunition for maybe 1 sustained fight. Not great odds, but better than nothing. Inside the house, Colt spread out a hand-drawn map of the ranch on the kitchen table. Iris stood beside him, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap Elena had given her. "Wardell won't come himself," Iris said, pointing to the main road leading to the ranch. "He'll send Edgar Finch and at least a dozen men. Edgar's vicious, but he's not smart. He'll take the direct approach, straight up the road, probably at dawn when he thinks we'll be least prepared." "What about the canyon pass?" Colt indicated a narrow route to the east, too risky for horses carrying armed men. "One defender could hold that pass against 20 attackers." Iris's finger traced along the map. "But there's another way in that most people don't know about. Through the dry creek bed on the western edge of your property. It's how I would do it. Send the main force up front as a distraction while a smaller group flanks from the west." Colt studied the map, impressed. "You've got a tactical mind." "My father was in the cavalry before he lost everything to gambling," Iris said quietly. "Taught me to read terrain, think 3 moves ahead. Said it was the only valuable thing he could give me." A sad smile crossed her face. "Turns out he was right." They worked through lunch, refining strategies and identifying weaknesses. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Elena burst into the house, breathless. "We've got a visitor," she announced. "And you're not going to believe who it is." Standing in the ranch yard was Sheriff Kemp, but he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a small girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with blonde braids and a dress that had seen better days. Iris gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Lucy! Oh my God, Lucy Finch!" The little girl's eyes went wide when she saw Iris. She broke away from the sheriff and ran, throwing her arms around Iris's waist. "Miss Iris, you're alive. They said you were dead. They said the desert got you, but I knew you were too strong." Iris dropped to her knees, wincing as the movement pulled at her healing injuries, but she didn't care. She wrapped her good arm around the child, tears streaming down her face. "Lucy, sweetheart, you made it to Prescott. You're safe. You're safe." Sheriff Kemp dismounted slowly, his expression unreadable. Colt's hand drifted toward his gun, uncertain what this visit meant. "Put the iron away, Colt," Kemp said tiredly. "I'm not here to arrest anyone, though Lord knows I should be. Then why are you here?" Colt demanded. The sheriff looked at Iris and Lucy, still holding each other like lifelines. "Because I'm tired of being Silas Wardell's lapdog. And because this little girl rode into my office 3 weeks ago and told me a story that made my blood run cold." Lucy pulled back from Iris, her young face suddenly serious beyond her years. "I told him everything, Miss Iris, about how my daddy and Mr. Wardell killed that miner, about how they were going to kill us for hearing it, about how you saved me. I tried to investigate," Kemp continued, quietly. "Asked questions, looked into the death of prospector named Samuel Hayes. That's who Finch was bragging about killing. Found his body in a sealed mine shaft, exactly where Lucy said it would be. Bullet hole in the back of his head. His claim papers mysteriously transferred to Wardell Enterprises a week before he died." Colt felt the pieces clicking together. "You have evidence." "I have a body and a witness," Kemp corrected. "But I also have a telegraph from the territorial governor's office telling me to drop the investigation. I have a judge who owes Wardell money. I have a prosecutor who vacations at Wardell's ranch house. The system that's supposed to bring men like Silas Wardell to justice is broken. He owns it, so what changed?" Elena asked. "Why are you here now?" Kemp pulled off his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. "Because yesterday I got word that Wardell's planning to ride out here with his men and burn this place to the ground. Officially, it'll be reported as a tragic ranch fire. Unofficially, everyone will know what it really was, a message. Cross Silas Wardell and he'll erase you from existence." Iris stood, keeping Lucy close. "Sheriff, if you know he's planning this, you have to stop him. You're the law." "I'm one man with a badge," Kemp said bitterly. "Against Wardell's private army and corrupt officials in his pocket. If I try to stop him alone, I'll end up in a ditch with a bullet in my back." He paused, his jaw setting. "But if I had help, if there were witnesses, if someone could prove that Wardell's men attacked first, that you were defending your property against criminals," he looked directly at Colt, "that might be different." "You want us to fight them," Colt said slowly. "And you want to be here to witness it." "I want to do my damn job for once," Kemp snapped. "I want to see Silas Wardell face consequences. But I'm a realist. The only way that happens is if he's caught red-handed, with credible witnesses, in an act so brazen that even his paid politicians can't sweep it under the rug." Thomas stepped forward from where he'd been listening. "Begging your pardon, Sheriff, but how do we know this ain't a trap? How do we know you ain't working for Wardell right now, getting us to incriminate ourselves?" It was a fair question. Kemp reached into his vest and pulled out a folded document. "This is my resignation letter dated yesterday. Win or lose, after this is over, I'm done being sheriff. I'm too old to keep compromising my principles. Too tired to keep looking the other way." He handed the letter to Colt. "Read it if you want. It's already sealed and addressed to the territorial office. I'm burning my bridges here, same as you." Colt read the letter, then passed it to Eleanor. It was genuine, a bitter, honest account of corruption and moral failure that no man would write unless he meant every word. "We've got 4 days left," Colt said finally. "If you're serious about this, Sheriff, we could use someone who knows Wardell's tactics. Someone who can testify when this is over." "I'm serious," Kemp's voice was iron, "and I'm not alone. There are 3 deputies in Prescott who've been waiting for someone to make a stand against Wardell. They'll come when I send word. And there's a federal marshal passing through Silver Springs. He's clean, owes nothing to Wardle. If we can get him here, get him to witness what happens, that testimony will carry weight even Wardle can't buy off. Iris spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. The little girl my daddy killed, Samuel Hayes' daughter. Does she have family? Kemp nodded. His wife and 2 daughters. They're living in a boarding house in Prescott, nearly destitute. Mrs. Hayes has been trying to get someone to investigate her husband's death for weeks. When I told her Lucy's story corroborated everything she suspected, he paused. She wept. Said it was the first time in 3 weeks anyone had believed her. The weight of that settled over the group. This wasn't just about Iris anymore. It wasn't even just about Wardell. It was about every person he'd crushed. Every family he'd destroyed, every crime he'd committed while hiding behind money and influence. Elena broke the silence. Then we'd better make sure we win. Because if we lose, all those people, the Hayes family, Lucy, all of us, will have died for nothing. We're not going to lose, Colt said, with more confidence than he felt. He looked around at the faces staring back at him. His sister, determined and fierce, Miguel and Thomas, loyal to the bone, Iris, who'd already survived hell and came out fighting, little Lucy, who'd been brave enough to testify, and Sheriff Kemp, a man finally choosing integrity over safety. Here's what we're going to do, Colt continued. Sheriff, send your telegram to those deputies and that federal marshal. Tell them to be here in 4 days, ready to witness and arrest. Miguel, Thomas, we need watch posts set up around the property. I want eyes on every approach. Elena, you and Iris figure out how to keep Lucy safe during the fight. She's not to be anywhere near the bullets. I want to help, Lucy said, her voice small but brave. Iris knelt down beside her again. You already did help, sweetheart. You told the truth when it was scary to do so. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. Now we're going to make sure your bravery meant something. As the sun set on day 1, the Brennan Ranch had transformed from a simple homestead into something else entirely. A battleground, yes, but also a beacon. Word would spread about what was happening here. People would hear that someone finally stood up to Silas Wardle, and whether they won or lost, that act of defiance would matter. Inside the house that night, Colt found Iris standing by the window, watching the stars emerge. Lucy was asleep upstairs, exhausted from her ordeal. Penny for your thoughts, Colt said softly. Iris turned, and in the lamplight she looked younger, vulnerable. I was thinking about how strange life is. 2 weeks ago, I was dying in a canyon, branded like an animal, convinced I'd never matter to anyone ever again. Now I'm standing in your home, surrounded by people willing to risk everything for something as simple as doing what's right. It's not simple, Colt said. Nothing about this is simple. No, Iris agreed. But it's good. Even if we don't survive this, even if Wardell wins, at least I got to feel this. Got to feel like I was worth fighting for. Like I was more than what he carved into my skin. Colt crossed the room until he stood directly in front of her. You were always more than that. The brand doesn't define you, Iris. Your courage does. Your heart does. The fact that even after everything he did to you, you still risked your life to save a child, that's who you are. Iris looked up at him, and something shifted in the air between them. If we survive this, when we survive this, Colt corrected. When we survive this, Iris amended with a small smile. I'd like to stay, here, on the ranch. If you'll have me, not because I owe you, but because, she took a breath, because somewhere between Devil's Canyon and right now, I think I started falling for a stubborn cowboy who doesn't know when to walk away from a fight. Colt felt his heart hammer against his ribs. For what it's worth, that stubborn cowboy started falling the moment he saw you weren't going to give up. Not on yourself, not on what's right, not on living. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. His hand cupped her cheek, and Iris leaned into the touch like it was water in the desert. 4 more days, she whispered. 4 more days, he agreed, and then we fight for the right to have a future, together. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sage and rain. 4 days until the storm arrived. 4 days until everything changed. 4 days to prepare for a war they couldn't afford to lose. Day 2 began before sunrise. Colt woke to the sound of hammering and found Miguel already working on the western fence line, reinforcing posts and stringing barbed wire at strategic angles. The man hadn't slept more than 3 hours, but his eyes burned with purpose. "Morning, boss," Miguel called out, not pausing in his work. "Figured if they're coming from the creek bed like Miss Iris said, we should make it hurt when they try." Thomas emerged from the barn carrying armfuls of wooden planks. "Been thinking about the windows," he said. "We board them up from the inside, leave rifle slots, turn the house into a proper defensive position." Colt nodded, impressed by their initiative. These men didn't have to stay. They could have taken their pay and ridden out at the first sign of trouble. Instead, they were digging in like this was their fight too, because maybe it was. Maybe it had always been everyone's fight. They just hadn't realized it yet. Inside, Eleanor had transformed the kitchen into an armory and medical station. Rifles leaned against the wall, cleaned and oiled. Bullets were counted and divided into equal portions. Bandages, alcohol, and needle and thread sat ready on the table, grim preparation for the wounds that would inevitably come. "Coffee's on," Eleanor said, without looking up from her inventory list. "And Iris is teaching Lucy how to load a pistol in the parlor." Colt nearly dropped his cup. "She's doing what?" "Relax. It's unloaded. And it's smart." Elena finally met his eyes. "If things go bad, if somehow they get past all of us, Lucy needs to know how to protect herself. Iris is teaching her the mechanics, the safety, the respect a weapon requires. She's not turning her into a soldier, she's giving her options." Colt found them in the parlor, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Iris held an empty revolver, demonstrating the proper grip while Lucy watched with solemn attention. "You never pointed at anything you're not willing to destroy," Iris was saying. "Not as a joke, not as a threat, not even if you're absolutely sure it's not loaded. The gun doesn't know the difference between practice and real life." "What if I'm too scared?" Lucy asked in a small voice. "What if someone bad comes and I freeze?" Iris set the gun down and took both of Lucy's hands in hers. "Then you run, you hide, you survive any way you can. This," she gestured to the revolver, "is only for the moment when running and hiding aren't options anymore. And even then, being scared is okay. Brave people aren't the ones who don't feel fear. They're the ones who feel it and do what needs doing anyway." Lucy nodded slowly, processing this. "Like how you saved me even though you were scared." "Exactly like that." Colt cleared his throat, announcing his presence. Lucy jumped up and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. The gesture caught him off guard, this small person trusting him completely, believing he could keep her safe. "Mr. Colt, Miss, Iris says you're the best shot in the territory," Lucy said, looking up at him with wide eyes. "Is that true?" "I'm adequate," Colt said modestly. "He's being humble," Iris countered, standing with fluid grace. Her arm was mostly healed now, the sling discarded yesterday. "I watched him shoot a rattlesnake from 30 yards while it was moving. Never seen anything like it. Will you teach me to shoot like that?" Lucy asked. "When I'm older," the question hung in the air, weighted with assumption. The assumption that there would be an older, that they'd all survive what was coming, that life would continue beyond these 4 days. "Oh, when you're older," Colt agreed. "I'll teach you everything I know." Lucy beamed, satisfied with this promise, and skipped off to find Elena. Alone with Iris, Colt crossed the room. "You're good with her. Natural." "I always wanted children," Iris said quietly. "Before everything happened, used to imagine a little house somewhere, a family, the kind of simple life most people take for granted." She touched the place where the brand lay hidden beneath her dress. "Wardell took that dream from me. Made me believe I was too damaged, too marked, for anything normal or good. Dreams don't die that easy," Colt said. They just hibernate, wait for the right moment to come back to life. Iris smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. You're an optimist disguised as a pragmatist, Colt Brennan. And you're a fighter disguised as someone who'd given up. The moment was interrupted by Sheriff Kemp riding in hard, his horse lathered with sweat. Colt and Iris rushed outside to meet him. "We've got a problem," Kemp announced, dismounting quickly. "My deputies can't come. Wardell got wind something was happening and had them arrested on trumped-up charges this morning. They're sitting in jail in Prescott right now." Colt felt his stomach sink. "What about the federal marshal?" "He's coming, but he won't arrive until the day after tomorrow at the earliest. He's riding from Silver Springs, and that's a hard 2-day journey." Kemp pulled off his hat, frustrated. "We're down 3 guns, and our best legal witness won't be here in time." "How does Wardell know?" Iris demanded. "How does he always seem to know what's happening before it happens?" "Because he owns people," Kemp said bitterly. "Telegraph operators, ranch hands, shopkeepers. Half the territory feeds him information, either for money or out of fear. We should assume he knows everything we're planning." Thomas and Miguel had gathered around, faces grim. Elena stood in the doorway, Lucy peeking out from behind her skirts. "So we're outnumbered, outgunned, and he knows we're ready for him," Miguel summarized. "Anything else we should know?" "Actually, yes." Kemp reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather-bound ledger. "I broke into Wardell's office last night. Figured if I was already burning bridges, might as well burn them thoroughly. This is his personal account book. Every bribe, every illegal deal, every murder he's ordered for the past 5 years. It's all here, documented in his own hand." Iris took the ledger with trembling fingers, flipping through pages filled with damning evidence. This could destroy him. Even without the marshal, this could bring down his entire empire. "If it survives the next 3 days," Kemp cautioned. "If we survive, that ledger only matters if someone's alive to testify about where it came from and how we got it. Then we make damn sure someone survives," Colt said. He turned to address the group. "Listen up. Plans change, but our goal doesn't. We hold this ranch, we protect Iris and Lucy, and we make sure that ledger gets into the right hands no matter what." Day 3 brought unexpected reinforcements. Colt was checking the ammunition supply when he heard horses approaching, multiple riders. His hand went to his gun, but Elena called out from the porch, "They're friendly." 5 riders crested the hill, and Colt's jaw dropped. Leading them was Marcus Webb, who owned the neighboring ranch 10 miles east. Behind him rode 3 other ranchers, and one woman Colt didn't recognize. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Webb dismounted, a weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes and calloused hands. "Word travels, Colt. Heard you were making a stand against Wardell. Heard you were sheltering a woman he'd branded and left for dead. Heard you were finally doing what the rest of us have been too scared to do for years." The other ranchers nodded agreement. One of them, a younger man named Jacob Pierce, spoke up. "Wardell's been bleeding us dry for years, charging inflated prices for use of his water rights, buying up land through intimidation, destroying anyone who challenges him. We're tired of it. We're tired of being afraid." The woman stepped forward. She was in her 40s, well-dressed despite the trail dust, with steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. "My name is Catherine Morrison. I'm a journalist from San Francisco, currently investigating corruption in the Arizona territory. I've been tracking Silas Wardell's activities for 6 months, and when I heard about your situation, I came as fast as I could." "A journalist?" Elena looked intrigued. "What good is a journalist in a gunfight?" "I don't plan to fight," Morrison said. "I plan to document. If Wardell attacks you, if he brings his men here to kill innocent people over a woman he tortured, I'll have photographs, written testimony, and evidence that even his bought politicians can't suppress. The pen might not be mightier than the sword, but it's got a longer reach. What happens here will be front-page news in every major newspaper from here to Washington." Iris emerged from the house, and her eyes went wide when she saw Marcus Webb. "Mr. Webb, you came." "Of course I came, child." Webb's voice was gentle. "I knew your father before the gambling took hold of him. He was a good man who made terrible choices, but that wasn't your fault. What Wardell did to you," his voice hardened, "that's evil. Pure and simple. And evil flourishes when good people do nothing." By midday, the Brennan Ranch had transformed into a small fortress populated by an unlikely army. The 5 additional ranchers brought extra rifles, ammunition, and more importantly, legitimacy. These were respected men in the territory, witnesses who couldn't be easily dismissed or intimidated. Catherine Morrison set up her camera equipment, documenting everything. She interviewed Iris on camera, photographed the brand on her shoulder with Iris's permission, and recorded Lucy's testimony about witnessing her father confess to murder. "This is powerful," Morrison said, reviewing her notes. "Wardell can buy sheriffs and judges, but he can't buy the national press. When this story breaks, he'll have nowhere to hide." That evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of amber and purple, Colt found Iris on the porch again. It had become their spot, this quiet place where they could steal moments away from the chaos. "Tomorrow's day 4. Iris said softly. "One more day after that." "I know. Colt, if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." "But if it does," Iris insisted, turning to face him, "I need you to know that these past 2 weeks, even with everything, even with the fear and the danger, I've been happier than I've been in years. You gave me something I thought was lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope. The belief that I deserve a future. That I'm more than what was done to me." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his skin. "You saved my life in that canyon, but you did something more important here. You saved who I am. The person I'd almost forgotten existed." Colt pulled her close, and she came willingly, resting her head against his chest. He could feel her heartbeat, strong and steady, matching his own. "When this is over," he said into her hair, "when Wardell's dealt with and the dangers past, I want to build something with you. Not sure what exactly. Maybe we expand the ranch, maybe we do something completely different. But I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here, knowing we survived and built something good from all this ugliness." Iris pulled back just enough to look up at him, and there were tears in her eyes. But they were the good kind. "Are you asking me to stay, Colt Brennan?" "I'm asking you to stay. I'm asking you to build a life here. I'm asking—" He paused, suddenly nervous, despite facing down an army in 2 days. "I'm asking if you'd consider marrying a stubborn cowboy who doesn't know when to quit." Iris laughed, the sound bright and free. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's the only proposal you've ever heard. Fair point." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promises about tomorrows they hadn't earned yet. "Yes to all of it. After we survive, after this is over, yes." From inside the house, someone started playing a harmonica. The gathered ranchers joined in, singing an old folk song about hard times and holding on. Lucy's laugh rang out over the music, high and pure. For just this moment, surrounded by unlikely allies and facing impossible odds, the Brennan Ranch felt like exactly what it was supposed to be. Home. Day 4 arrived with an unexpected message. A rider approached under a white flag, one of Wardell's men, a young cowhand who looked terrified of his errand. He handed Sheriff Kemp an envelope, then rode off without a word. Kemp opened it and read, his expression darkening. "It's from Wardell. He's offering terms." "What kind of terms?" Colt demanded. "He'll call off the attack if we hand over Iris and the ledger. He'll even let the rest of us live, no consequences. Says he's being generous, giving us one last chance to avoid bloodshed." Iris went pale but stood straighter. "Of course he is. He wants me and that ledger more than he wants revenge. With me dead and the evidence destroyed, he's safe. Everyone here survives, life goes back to normal, and Silas Wardell remains untouchable." "It's not happening," Colt said immediately. "It's tempting, though," Marcus Webb said carefully. "Not that any of us would actually do it, but Wardell knows human nature. He knows that when people are scared, when death is on the horizon, they start calculating costs. Start wondering if one life is worth risking 10. Is that what you're thinking, Marcus? Elena challenged. No, but I guarantee some of Wardell's men are thinking it. Not everyone who rides for him is loyal. Some are just scared or desperate or trapped. Webb turned to Catherine Morrison. Could be useful. A written offer like this, trying to buy us off, trying to get us to hand over a witness and evidence. That's conspiracy. That's witness tampering. More ammunition for your story. Morrison was already photographing the letter. Oh, this is perfect. He's incriminating himself in writing, and he's too arrogant to realize it. As the sun set on day 4, everyone gathered in the ranch house for a final meeting. Tomorrow, Wardell would come. Tomorrow, everything would be decided. The federal marshal should arrive by late afternoon, Kemp said, studying a map. But we have to assume Wardell will attack at dawn. That means holding out for potentially 12 hours. We can do it, Thomas said confidently. We've got good positions, good sight lines, and we've got Wright on our side. Wright doesn't stop bullets, Miguel countered, though there was no fear in his voice. But we've got something better. We've got each other, and we've got something worth fighting for. Lucy raised her hand like she was in school. When Eleanor nodded to her, she spoke in a clear voice. Tomorrow's my birthday. I'll be 9 years old, and I want to spend it here with all of you, alive. So we have to win. Because I already decided this is my family now, and families don't give up. The simple declaration hit everyone like a physical force. This child, who'd lost so much, who'd witnessed horrors no child should see, had claimed them all as her family. Then we better not disappoint her, Iris said, her voice thick with emotion, as everyone dispersed to final preparations and uneasy sleep. Colt stood watch on the porch one last time. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Silas Wardell was preparing his men, sharpening his hate, planning their destruction. But here, on this small ranch in the middle of the Arizona desert, ordinary people had decided to stand. Not because they were fearless, but because some things, justice, dignity, the right to live without terror, were worth the fear. Tomorrow would bring fire and blood. Tomorrow would test everything they'd built in these 4 short days. But tonight they had hope. And sometimes hope was the most dangerous weapon of all. Day 5 arrived with deceptive peace. The sun rose blood-red over the eastern mountains, painting the desert in shades of crimson and gold. Colt stood at his window, fully dressed and armed, watching the horizon with eyes that hadn't seen sleep. Every instinct he possessed screamed that today would change everything. Elena appeared beside him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She passed him one without a word. They stood together in silence, siblings who'd survived their parents' death, droughts, hard winters, and the grinding poverty of frontier life. This should have been just another challenge, but they both knew it wasn't. I'm not scared of dying, Elena said finally. I'm scared of failing. Scared that Lucy will watch us fall, that Iris will end up back in Wardell's hands. That all of this, everything we've built here, will have been for nothing. We're not going to fail, Colt said, though his grip tightened on the coffee cup. How can you be sure? Because failure means Wardell wins. And I'm not letting that happen. Downstairs, the house stirred to life. Miguel and Thomas were already at their posts. Miguel watching the western creek bed, Thomas covering the main road from the barn's hayloft. The visiting ranchers had taken positions around the property perimeter, turning the ranch into a series of overlapping fields of fire. Marcus Webb had proven invaluable in positioning everyone. His military experience from the Civil War showed in every tactical decision. We don't need to win, he explained during last night's final briefing. We just need to hold it until the marshal arrives. Make it costly enough that Wardell's men lose their nerve. Catherine Morrison had set up her camera equipment in the house's safest room, ready to document whatever came. Sheriff Kemp sat with her, the stolen ledger on his lap, prepared to testify. And Lucy, brave, resilient Lucy, was in the cellar with Iris, surrounded by water barrels and supply crates. It was the most defensible position on the property. If everything went wrong, If the house fell, they'd make their final stand there. Colt had checked on them before dawn. Lucy was teaching Iris a song her mother used to sing, her voice sweet and clear in the darkness. Iris joined in on the chorus, and for a moment it was possible to forget the horror approaching with the sunrise. "Promise me something," Iris had said when Lucy dozed off. "If it comes down to choosing between the ledger and me, choose the ledger. That evidence can bring down Wardle's entire empire. My life isn't worth letting him walk free." "Your life is worth everything," Colt replied fiercely. "And I'm not choosing. We're all walking out of this alive." Now as the sun climbed higher, Colt positioned himself at the front window with his rifle. Elena took the side window. They had clear sight lines across the approach, and the fortifications they'd built would provide cover. 7 o'clock came and went. Nothing. 8 o'clock. Still nothing. The tension was excruciating. Every shadow looked like a rider. Every bird taking flight seemed like a signal. "Maybe he's not coming," Elena whispered. Maybe the offer was genuine. Maybe... The distant rumble of hoofbeats cut her off. They came from the east, silhouetted against the rising sun. At least 15 riders, maybe more. They rode in formation, organized and deliberate. At their head, Colt could make out Edgar Finch's distinctive black hat. "Here we go," Colt muttered. Chambering around, the riders stopped just outside rifle range, arrayed in a line like cavalrymen, preparing for a charge. Edgar Finch rode forward alone, stopping 50 yards from the house. "Colt Brennan." His voice carried across the desert morning. "I'm here on behalf of Silas Wardell. You're harboring a criminal and stolen property. Send them out now and everyone else walks away clean. You've got 5 minutes to decide." Colt stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. "The only criminals here are you and the men you ride with, Finch. You murdered Samuel Hayes in cold blood. Your own daughter testified to it. You're not taking anyone from this ranch?" Finch's laugh was ugly. "My daughter? That little traitor will learn what happens to family that betrays family. As for Hayes, he was a nobody who didn't know when to take a deal. Same mistake you're making now, Brennan. The federal marshal is on his way," Sheriff Kemp called out, appearing beside Colt. "He'll be here by afternoon. Whatever you do here, Edgar, you'll answer for it, Kemp." Finch sounded genuinely surprised. "You're supposed to be the law. You're supposed to be on our side. I'm on the side of justice," Kemp replied. "Something you wouldn't recognize if it shot you in the face." "Which it's about to. Your 5 minutes are up," Finch snarled. He wheeled his horse around and galloped back to the line of riders. Colt and Kemp retreated into the house. Through the window they watched Finch confer with his men. Some nodded eagerly. Others looked uncertain, their body language suggesting they'd rather be anywhere else. "Not all of them want to be here," Eleanor observed. "Some are just following orders because they're scared of Wardell." "Doesn't matter," Colt said grimly. "Scared men with guns are still dangerous." The riders split into 2 groups. 10 headed straight for the ranch at a gallop, while 5 peeled off, circling toward the western approach, exactly as Iris had predicted. "Here they come." Thomas shouted from the barn. The first shots rang out as the charging riders opened fire. Bullets thudded into the reinforced walls and shutters. Colt aimed carefully, leading his target, and squeezed the trigger. One rider tumbled from his saddle. The gunfight exploded into chaos. Miguel's rifle barked from the western position as the flanking group reached the creek bed. The barbed wire they'd strung slowed the horses, creating confusion. 2 riders went down immediately. From the barn, Thomas fired methodically, picking off targets with the patience of a man who'd hunted dangerous game. The visiting ranchers added their fire, creating a devastating crossfire that shredded Wardle's charge. But the attackers had numbers and determination. They reached the barn and set it ablaze, flames licking up the dry wood. Thomas barely escaped, rolling out a back window as smoke billowed. "Fall back to the house!" Marcus Webb shouted. The defenders consolidated, pulling back to the main building as planned. The barn was lost, but it had served its purpose, bleeding the attackers, forcing them to commit. Edgar Finch rallied his remaining men, maybe 10 now, and prepared for another assault. But he'd miscalculated. The defenders weren't panicked settlers. They were prepared, dug in, and fighting for something that mattered. "Catherine, you getting all this?" Kemp asked. The journalist's camera clicked steadily. "Every moment. This is going to be the story that ends Wardell." The second wave hit harder. Finch's men dismounted, using their horses as cover, advancing with coordinated fire. They were clearly experienced gunmen, probably hired killers from Wardell's mining operations. A bullet shattered the window next to Elena, showering her with glass. She didn't flinch, just shifted position and kept firing. Colt's rifle grew hot in his hands. His ears rang from the constant gunfire. Smoke filled the room, stinging his eyes. But they were holding, barely but holding. Then disaster struck. One of Finch's men threw something through a broken window, a bottle stuffed with burning cloth. It shattered on the floor and flames erupted. "Fire!" Elena screamed. Marcus Webb grabbed a blanket and smothered the flames before they could spread. But the message was clear. They were trying to burn them out. "Just like the barn. We can't stay here," Jacob Pierce shouted over the gunfire. "They'll torch the whole house with us in it." "We stay," Colt commanded. "The marshal is coming. We just need to hold out." But holding out was becoming impossible. They were running low on ammunition. The smoke made it hard to aim. And Finch's men, sensing victory, pressed harder. In the cellar, Iris heard the gunfire intensify and knew things were going badly. Lucy clung to her, trembling but quiet. "Miss Iris," Lucy whispered, "are we going to die?" Iris pulled the girl close, stroking her hair. "No, sweetheart. Colt won't let that happen. None of them will." But even as she said it, Iris's mind raced through options. If the house fell, if Colt and the others were killed, she'd have one choice: surrender herself to save Lucy. Hand over the ledger, end this, and hope Wardell killed her quickly. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all she had. Above them the battle raged on. Another fire bottle crashed through a window, and this time the flames caught. The eastern wall began to burn. "We're out of time!" Thomas yelled. Colt's mind raced. They couldn't retreat. There was nowhere to go. They couldn't surrender. Wardell would kill them all anyway. They were trapped, outnumbered, and running out of ammunition. Then, like a miracle, the sound of hoofbeats thundered from the south. But these weren't Wardell's men. A dozen riders crested the hill, and at their head rode a man, wearing a federal marshal's badge that caught the morning sun. Behind him came more ranchers, townsfolk, even a few former miners who'd been cheated by Wardell. Word had spread. The stand at the Brennan Ranch had become something bigger than any of them had planned. People had come to witness, to help, to finally push back against a tyrant. Edgar Finch saw them coming, and his face went pale. His men were already wavering, and this new force shattered their resolve completely. Federal Marshal Clayton Reed, the lead rider, called out in a voice that boomed across the battlefield. "Everyone lay down your weapons. This fight is over." Finch's men looked at each other, then at their boss. One by one they dropped their guns and raised their hands. They were hired muscle, not fanatics. Prison was better than dying for a lost cause. Only Edgar Finch refused. "No," he snarled. "I'm not going back. I'm not hanging for some nobody prospector who didn't matter." He raised his pistol, aiming at the house, aiming where he knew Lucy was hiding. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. Colt, Elena, and Sheriff Kemp all fired at once. Edgar Finch dropped like a puppet with cut strings, dead before he hit the ground. The silence that followed was deafening. Marshal Reed dismounted, surveying the scene with hard eyes. He walked to Finch's body, then to the surrendering gunman, then to the burned barn and bullet-riddled house. "Someone want to tell me what in God's name happened here?" he demanded. Sheriff Kemp stepped forward, the ledger under his arm. "Marshal, I have evidence of multiple murders, land fraud, corruption, and conspiracy committed by Silas Wardell and his associates. This attack on the Brennan Ranch was an attempt to silence witnesses and destroy evidence. Everything's been documented." Catherine Morrison emerged with her camera and notebooks. "Marshal Reed, I'm Catherine Morrison with the San Francisco Chronicle. I've photographed and recorded everything that happened here today. This was a premeditated assault on innocent citizens, ordered by the wealthiest man in the territory." The cellar door burst open, and Lucy ran out, followed by Iris. The little girl sprinted straight to Sheriff Kemp, tears streaming down her face. "He's dead," she whispered, staring at her father's body. "My daddy's really dead." Kemp knelt down, his weathered face gentle. "I know, child. I know. I don't feel sad," Lucy said, confused by her own emotions. "I feel free. Is that wrong?" "No, Lucy, that's not wrong." He pulled her into a hug. "That's just honest." Marshal Reed looked around at the assembled group, the defenders, the witnesses, the evidence scattered across the battlefield. His jaw set in a hard line. "Where's Silas Wardell?" he asked. "His mansion 15 miles north," Kemp replied. "Probably thinking he won. Probably celebrating. Then let's go ruin his day." Reed turned to his deputies. "Round up these prisoners. Get statements from everyone here. And somebody send a telegram to the territorial governor. Tell him we're arresting Silas Wardell for murder, conspiracy, assault, and about 20 other charges I'll think of on the ride over." As the marshal's men organized the prisoners and collected evidence, Colt finally allowed himself to breathe. The fight was over. They'd survived. He found Iris standing apart from the chaos, staring at the burning barn with tears running down her face. "Hey," he said softly. "We did it. We won, I know." She turned to him, and her smile was radiant despite the tears. I didn't think I'd live to see this day. Didn't think justice was possible for people like me. People like you deserve justice most of all." Colt pulled her close, and she melted into his arms. Around them, the ranch smoldered and bled, but they were alive. They were together, and for the first time in years, the shadow of Silas Wardell wasn't hanging over their future. Elena appeared, soot-streaked and grinning. "Marshal wants statements from everyone. Going to be a long day of talking." "Worth it," Iris said. "Definitely worth it," Elena agreed. Then she looked at her brother and Iris, seeing how they held each other, and her grin widened. "You know, once all this settles down, we're going to need to plan a wedding. Can't have you two living in sin on a respectable ranch." Iris laughed, a sound of pure joy, and Colt felt something in his chest expand, warm and right. Lucy ran up and grabbed both their hands. "Can I be in the wedding, please?" "I've never been in a wedding before." "You can be the flower girl," Iris promised, ruffling the girl's hair. "What's a flower girl doing?" "She walks down the aisle before the bride, throwing flower petals and looking beautiful." Lucy considered this seriously. "I can do that. I'm very good at walking, and Miss Elena says I'm pretty as a picture." As the sun climbed higher, as the marshals did their work and the witnesses gave their statements, life began to pulse back into the Brennan Ranch. The barn was gone, the house was damaged, and there was still so much uncertainty ahead, but they'd stood, they'd fought, and they'd won. Sometimes that was enough. The arrest of Silas Wardell happened at noon, and half the territory came to witness it. Marshal Reed rode up to Wardell's mansion with 20 armed men, a warrant and enough documented evidence to hang 10 men twice over. Wardell's butler tried to turn them away at the gate, citing his employer's important business and influential connections. Reed shot the lock off the gate and rode through anyway. Colt, Iris, and Sheriff Kemp had accompanied the marshal, along with Catherine Morrison and her camera. They wanted to see this, needed to see it. After everything they'd survived, they'd earned the right to watch justice finally catch up with a man who'd thought himself untouchable. They found Silas Wardell in his study, surrounded by opulence that had been purchased with blood and corruption. He sat behind a massive oak desk, smoking a cigar, looking utterly unconcerned by the armed men filing into his sanctuary. "Marshal Reed," Wardell said smoothly, not bothering to stand. "To what do I owe this dramatic intrusion?" "I was just about to have lunch." "Silas Wardell, you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, witness intimidation, land fraud, assault, and corruption of public officials." Reed's voice was hard as granite. "Stand up and put your hands behind your back." Wardell laughed, actually laughed. "On whose testimony?" "Edgar Finch's. He's dead. His men? They're hired hands with no credibility." "Sheriff Kemp's? He's a disgraced lawman who'll say anything to save his own skin." He took a long draw on his cigar. "Marshal, I've weathered storms bigger than this. By this time tomorrow, I'll be free, and you'll be looking for a new job." "Actually," Catherine Morrison said, stepping forward with her notebook, "it's on the testimony of 12 credible witnesses, including 4 respected ranchers, a federal lawman, a sheriff, and a journalist whose story will be printed in every major newspaper from San Francisco to Washington. We have your personal ledger documenting 5 years of crimes. We have photographs of a woman you branded like cattle. We have the testimony of a child who watched you and Edgar Finch conspire to murder. And we have the body of Samuel Hayes right where that child said it would be." For the first time, Wardle's composure cracked. His eyes darted to the ledger in Kemp's hands, and recognition, then fury, flooded his face. "You broke into my office. You stole my property. That evidence is inadmissible." "Actually," Reed interrupted, "when Sheriff Kemp found probable cause to believe multiple murders had been committed, he had every legal right to search your premises and seize evidence. Your expensive lawyers can argue about it at trial, but I promise you, this ledger will be seen by a jury." Wardell stood slowly, his mask of civility finally slipping away to reveal the monster beneath. His gaze locked on Iris, standing between Colt and Kemp, and pure hatred blazed in his eyes. "You," he hissed. "This is all because of you. You ungrateful little—" Colt stepped forward, his hand on his gun. "Finish that sentence, and badge or no badge, I'll put a bullet in you myself." "Mr. Brennan," Reed said quietly. "Stand down. He's not worth it. Listen to the marshal, cowboy," Wardell sneered. "You think you've won? You think this changes anything? I own judges. I own politicians. I own this entire territory. In 6 months I'll be free, and you'll all pay for this humiliation. Especially her." He pointed at Iris. "I should have killed you in that canyon when I had the chance." "You just confessed," Morrison said calmly, her pen racing across her notebook. "In front of 20 witnesses. Thank you for making my article even more damning." Wardell's face went purple with rage. He lunged for his desk drawer, where he undoubtedly kept a weapon, but Reed was faster. The marshal's pistol appeared in his hand like magic, trained directly at Wardell's chest. "Don't," Reed said simply. The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Wardell slowly raised his hands, and deputies rushed forward to clap him in irons. As they led him out, Wardell passed directly by Iris. She stood tall, refusing to flinch or look away. This was the man who'd tortured her, branded her, left her to die. The man who'd stolen years of her life and made her believe she was worthless, and now he was in chains while she stood free. "I forgive you," Iris said quietly. Wardell stopped, confusion replacing his rage. "What?" "I forgive you," she repeated louder now. "Not because you deserve it. Not because what you did was anything less than evil, but because carrying hate for you is like drinking poison and expecting you to die. I'm done letting you live in my head. I'm done giving you power over who I am. You branded my skin, but you never touched my soul. And that must kill you, knowing you couldn't break me." For a moment, Silas Wardell, the richest, most powerful man in the territory, looked small, diminished, a petty tyrant faced with a victim who refused to stay broken. Then the deputies hauled him away, and he was just another criminal heading for a cell. Outside the mansion, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread impossibly fast, the way news always did in the territory. People lined the street, watching in stunned silence as Silas Wardell was loaded into a prison wagon. An old woman in the crowd began to clap. Then another joined her. Then a man, then more. Within seconds, the entire street erupted in applause, not celebrating violence or vengeance, but celebrating the simple fact that justice, for once, had actually worked. The ride back to the Brennan Ranch took 3 hours, and they spent most of it in companionable silence. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion and the surreal feeling that came after surviving something impossible. "What happens now?" Iris asked as the ranch came into view. The barn was a blackened skeleton, and the house still bore bullet holes and scorch marks, but it was home. "With Wardell, I mean. Will he really go to trial?" "He will," Kemp assured her. "Reed's an honest lawman. And with the evidence we have, even Wardell's corrupt connections can't save him. The territorial governor's already distancing himself. Politicians are like rats, always first to abandon a sinking ship. He'll hang, Morrison added matter-of-factly, for Samuel Hayes's murder at minimum, probably for ordering the attack on your ranch. My story will be published next week, and public pressure will make sure the trial is fair. Wardell's empire is finished. Back at the ranch, they found Elena supervising repairs with Marcus Webb and the other ranchers. Lucy was helping Thomas sort through salvaged tools. Her earlier trauma seemingly transformed into determined usefulness. How'd it go? Elena called out when she saw them approaching. Wardell's in custody, Colt replied, dismounting. It's over. Elena whooped and threw her arms around her brother. Miguel and Thomas abandoned their work to shake hands and clap backs. Lucy ran to Iris and hugged her tight. Does this mean we're safe now? The girl asked. Really safe? Really safe, Iris promised, kneeling to look Lucy in the eyes. Wardell can't hurt anyone ever again. That evening, they held an impromptu celebration in the damaged ranch house. It wasn't fancy, just beans, cornbread and coffee, but it tasted like victory. The visiting ranchers stayed, swapping stories and making plans to help rebuild what the fire had destroyed. Marcus Webb raised his coffee cup in a toast. To the Brennan Ranch, where ordinary people did something extraordinary, where courage mattered more than money and justice finally caught up with evil. Hear, hear, the group chorused. Later, as the others settled in for the night, Colt found Iris standing outside, looking up at the stars. The desert night was cool and clear, the air smelling of sage and smoke and possibility. Can't sleep? He asked, joining her. Too much energy. Too many thoughts. She turned to him, and in the moonlight she looked ethereal. I keep thinking this is a dream. That I'll wake up back in that canyon, dying, and none of this will have been real. It's real. Colt took her hand, solid and warm. You're real. We're real. Everything we fought for, it all happened. What do we do now? Iris asked. I've spent so long just surviving, just trying to make it through one more day. I don't know how to think about the future. Don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. Whatever you want, Colt said. That's the beautiful thing about freedom. It's yours to shape. You want to stay here, help rebuild, make this ranch into something bigger. We do that. You want to travel, see places that aren't trying to kill you? We do that too. You want to open a school, start a business, write a book about everything that happened? The world's open to you now? Iris smiled, but there was something vulnerable in her expression. What do you want, Colt? Honestly, I want mornings where we drink coffee together and argue about what to name the new horses. I want to teach Lucy how to shoot like I promised. I want to rebuild that barn bigger and better. I want Sunday dinners with too much food and laughter loud enough to echo off the mountains. He paused, suddenly self-conscious. I want a life so normal and boring and peaceful that we forget what it felt like to be afraid. With you, always with you. Iris's eyes glistened with tears, the good kind. That sounds perfect. Boring and perfect and exactly what I never thought I'd get to have. Then it's settled. Colt pulled her close, and she fit against him like she'd been designed for that exact spot. We'll rebuild this place together. Not just the buildings, but everything. A real future. A real life. Together, Iris echoed, and the word felt like a promise. The next morning brought more visitors, this time official ones. A lawyer from Prescott arrived with documents for Lucy. Edgar Finch's estate, modest as it was, would go to his daughter. More importantly, Mrs. Hayes, Samuel's widow, had filed papers to adopt Lucy if she was willing. She has 2 daughters close to your age, the lawyer explained to Lucy. They've lost their father. You've lost yours. Mrs. Hayes thought maybe you could all heal together. Be a family again. Lucy looked up at Iris, uncertain. Would I still see you? And Mr. Colt and Miss Elena. Of course, Iris assured her. Prescott's only a day's ride. We'll visit all the time, and you'll always have a place here whenever you need it. Okay, Lucy said, her voice small but brave. I think I'd like to have sisters. And a mama who doesn't know what my daddy did. A fresh start, the lawyer smiled. Mrs. Hayes will be very happy to hear that. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday morning when the desert bloomed with unexpected wildflowers after a rare rain, Iris Hartley and Colt Brennan were married in the rebuilt barn. It was a simple ceremony, no fancy church, no elaborate decorations, just friends, neighbors, and the people who'd stood with them when it mattered. Sheriff Kemp officiated, having been deputized for the occasion. Elena stood as maid of honor, with Lucy and Mrs. Hayes's daughters as flower girls. Miguel and Thomas served as groomsmen, looking uncomfortable but proud. In their Sunday best, Marcus Webb gave Iris away, the old rancher's eyes suspiciously bright as he placed her hand in Colt's. "Take care of her," Webb whispered to Colt. "With my life," Colt promised. Iris wore a simple white dress that Eleanor had sewn, and someone had woven wildflowers into her hair. She looked nothing like the half-dead woman Colt had found in Devil's Canyon, and everything like the warrior queen she'd always been underneath. When Kemp asked if anyone objected to the union, the crowd held its collective breath, half expecting some final drama, some last twist, but there was nothing. Just silence, then laughter, then Kemp pronouncing them husband and wife. Colt kissed his bride, and the gathering erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Catherine Morrison had brought copies of her published article, now circulating across the entire country. "The Woman Who Brought Down an Empire," the headline read, with Iris's story and Wardle's crimes documented in unflinching detail. "You're famous," Morrison told Iris. "I've already received letters from women across the country inspired by your courage. Some are leaving abusive situations. Others are reporting crimes they'd been too afraid to mention before. You changed more than just your own life, Mrs. Brennan. You changed the conversation, Mrs. Brennan." Iris tested the name silently, feeling how it fit. Not perfect, nothing ever was, but real, true, hers. As the sun set and the guests began departing, Iris and Colt found themselves alone on the porch. Their spot, their refuge. "Mrs. Brennan," Colt said, testing the name aloud. "Has a nice ring to it." "It does," Iris agreed. She touched her shoulder, where the brand still remained beneath her dress. It would always be there, a scar, a reminder of what she'd survived. But it didn't define her anymore. It was just part of her story, not the whole narrative. "Do you think Wardell knows?" she asked suddenly. "About the wedding? About how I'm not just surviving, but actually happy?" "Probably," Colt said. "News travels fast in the territory, even into jail cells." "Good." Iris smiled, sharp and satisfied. "I hope it eats him alive knowing I won. Knowing he's in chains while I'm free. Knowing he tried to destroy me and failed." "You didn't just survive him," Colt said. "You defeated him. There's a difference." Iris turned to her husband, and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or something close to it. "You know what the best part is? The very best part of all of this? What's that? He's not in this moment. He's not in our future. He's just gone. He doesn't get any more of my time, my thoughts, my life. We won, and now we get to actually live. That's the real victory, not his punishment, but our freedom to be happy without him shadowing everything." Colt pulled her close, and they stood together, watching the stars emerge one by one across the vast Arizona sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The desert wind carried the scent of rain and new growth. 2 months later, word came that Silas Wardle had been found guilty on all counts and sentenced to hang. The execution was scheduled for the following month. Iris was offered a chance to witness it. She declined. "He's already dead to me," she told Colt, "and I have better things to do with my time than watch a monster take his last breath. I'd rather spend that day teaching Lucy to ride, or helping Elena with her garden, or working beside you to build something good. That's the life I choose. Not revenge, not bitterness, just forward." And so they did. The Brennan Ranch grew and prospered. Word of their stand against Wardell attracted workers who wanted to be part of something that mattered. The ranch doubled in size, then tripled. They took on orphans as apprentices, teaching them honest work and giving them the second chances they deserved. Lucy visited every month, growing taller and happier with each trip. She eventually married a young rancher from Prescott and named her first daughter Iris. Elena found love too, with a traveling doctor who settled in the area, drawn by stories of the remarkable woman who'd stood beside her brother against impossible odds. Miguel and Thomas became ranch foremen, then partners, respected throughout the territory for their loyalty and skill. Sheriff Kemp retired for real this time, moving to Colorado to live with his daughter, finally able to sleep peacefully, knowing he'd done the right thing when it mattered most. Catherine Morrison won awards for her journalism, exposing corruption across the West. She remained lifelong friends with Iris, visiting the ranch annually to document how the woman who'd sparked a revolution was thriving, and Iris and Colt. They built the life they'd promised each other, not dramatic or grand, but rich in the ways that mattered. Morning coffee and silly arguments, Sunday dinners that lasted hours. Children who grew up never knowing fear of powerful men. Long rides through the desert they both loved. Years later, when Iris was old and grey, sitting on that same porch watching her grandchildren play, someone asked her if she'd ever regretted her choice to fight instead of flee, to stand instead of hide. She thought about it for a long moment, her hand finding Colt's across the armrest of their rocking chairs. Not once, she said finally. Not for a single second. Because that choice, to believe I deserved justice, to believe my life mattered, that choice gave me everything that came after. This ranch, this family, this love, this life, even the scars? Her granddaughter asked, having heard the story many times, but always wanting to hear it again. Especially the scars, Iris replied. They remind me I'm a survivor, a fighter, someone who looked at impossible odds and said, "Watch me anyway." And there's no shame in that. There's only strength, as the sun set over the Arizona desert one more time, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. Iris Hartley Brennan closed her eyes and smiled. She had been branded as damaged goods, left to die in a canyon, reduced to property by a man who thought himself a god, but she'd ridden back, wild, fierce, and unbreakable, straight into the heart of a cowboy who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. And together, they'd built an empire of their own, not of money or power, but of love, justice, and the stubborn refusal to let evil win. It was more than enough. It was everything. 5 years after Silas Wardell's execution, the Brennan Ranch had become something neither Colt nor Iris could have imagined in those desperate days of preparation and fear. The rebuilt barn stood twice as large as the original, its walls decorated with a mural that Elena had commissioned, a wild rose growing through barbed wire, representing beauty and strength emerging from pain. Ranch hands came from 3 territories away, drawn by fair wages and the reputation of a place where people were valued over profit. But success brought its own complications. On a crisp October morning, Iris stood in what had become her office, a small room off the main house where she managed the ranch's expanding operations. Letters covered her desk, most from women seeking advice, asylum, or simply wanting to share their own stories of survival. She'd become something she never intended, a symbol. Another one from Missouri, Elena said, entering with fresh coffee and more mail. A woman asking if we have room for her and her 3 children. Says her husband drank himself to death and the bank's taking everything. She heard about the Brennan Ranch, about how we help people start over. Iris rubbed her temples. That's the 4th this week. Elena, we're a cattle ranch, not a charity house. We're already housing 8 families in the workers' quarters. 9, actually. The Johnsons from Nevada arrived yesterday while you were in Prescott. Eleanor sat down, her expression sympathetic but firm. Iris, you can't save everyone. You know that, right? I know, but the words tasted like surrender. It's just, I remember what it felt like to have nowhere to go. To believe the whole world had decided I wasn't worth helping. If someone had turned me away, but someone didn't, Eleanor interrupted gently. Colt found you. We fought for you. And now you've built something incredible here. But if you stretch yourself too thin trying to help everyone, you'll break. Then you can't help anyone, including yourself. Before Iris could respond, rapid hoofbeats approached. Through the window, she saw Colt riding hard, his face set in that expression that meant trouble. He burst through the door minutes later, dust still clinging to his clothes. We've got a situation. 3 men rode onto the north pasture, claiming they have legal rights to that land. They're carrying a deed signed by Silas Wardell before his execution. Iris felt ice slide down her spine. That's impossible. Wardell's estate was liquidated. All his fraudulent land claims were voided by the territorial court. Apparently, not all of them. Colt handed her a document. This one's dated 6 years ago, before any of his crimes came to light. They're saying it's legitimate, that Wardell sold them the land legally, and they want us off it within 30 days. Iris read the deed. Her legal knowledge, hard-won through years of managing the ranch, telling her this was bad, very bad. This looks authentic. The signatures, the notary seal. If this was recorded before Wardell's arrest, it might actually hold up in court. That land has our winter grazing rights, Elena said, panic creeping into her voice. Without it, we can't sustain the herd. We'd have to sell off half the cattle. Or more, Colt added grimly. And there's something else. The man leading them, his name is Victor Wardell, Silas's nephew. The room fell silent. I didn't know Silas had a family, Iris finally said. Neither did anyone else. Apparently, Victor was back east, running shipping operations in New York. He stayed quiet during the trial, let his uncle go down without making waves. Now that the dust has settled and Silas's other properties have been redistributed, he's coming to collect whatever's left. Iris stood, pacing. After 5 years of peace, after building something good from the ashes of trauma, the Wardell legacy was reaching out to destroy them again. We need to see Sheriff Palmer, and maybe contact Marshal Reed if he's still in the territory. Already sent Miguel to fetch Palmer, Colt said. But Iris, this might be legal. If that deed is legitimate, we might actually have to give up that land. Then we fight it in court. We prove it was part of Wardell's fraudulent schemes. She stopped, seeing the doubt on Colt's face. What? Proving fraud after 6 years? Against a deed that predates any known crimes? That's an expensive legal battle, and we'd probably lose. Colt took her hands. I hate this as much as you do, but we might need to consider selling some assets, restructuring, finding a way to survive without that land. Survive, Iris repeated bitterly. Always surviving. Never just living without looking over our shoulders for the next threat. Eleanor touched her arm. You are living. Look at what you've built. One piece of land, one challenge. It doesn't erase everything you've accomplished, but it felt like it did. It felt like Silas Wardell was reaching from beyond the grave to remind her that monsters leave echoes, and those echoes could destroy just as thoroughly as the original evil. Sheriff Palmer arrived within hours, reviewed the deed, and delivered the news they'd been dreading. It's legitimate, filed properly, notarized correctly, dated before any of Wardell's crimes became public knowledge. Victor Wardell has a legal claim to that land. There has to be something we can do, Iris insisted. Palmer shifted uncomfortably. You could challenge it in territorial court, but that could take years and cost more than the land's worth. Or, he hesitated. Or what? Colt demanded. Or you could negotiate with Victor Wardell. Buy the land from him. I'm told he's a businessman, not a crusader. He might be willing to sell at a fair price. With what money? Elena asked. We've invested everything into expanding, into helping the families who've come here seeking refuge. We don't have capital for a major land purchase. Iris felt the walls closing in. After everything, surviving torture, defeating a tyrant, building a legacy of justice, it would end like this. Not with drama or violence, but with legal documents and financial reality grinding them down. I'll meet with him, she said finally. Victor Wardell. I'll negotiate. Iris, no, Colt protested. You don't need to face another Wardell alone. I'm not that broken girl from the canyon anymore, Iris cut him off, though her voice was gentle. And I won't let fear of a name control my choices. If he's a businessman, then we'll do business. If he's here for revenge, then I'll face that too. But I won't hide. The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon at the ranch house. Victor Wardell arrived with two lawyers and an air of polished sophistication that was distinctly different from his uncle's brutal charm. He was younger than Iris, expected perhaps 35, with sharp features and calculating eyes. When he saw Iris, something flickered across his face. Recognition? Disgust? She couldn't tell. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "thank you for agreeing to meet. I imagine this situation is quite distressing for you, Mr. Wardell." Iris kept her voice professional. "Let's be direct. You have a legal claim to land that's essential to our ranch's operation. What are your intentions?" Victor settled into the offered chair, his lawyers flanking him like sentries. "My intentions are simple. Reclaim what's rightfully mine. My uncle may have been a criminal, but this particular transaction was legitimate. I intend to exercise my legal rights. By forcing us off land, we've worked for 5 years. By claiming property that was purchased legally 6 years ago." Victor's smile was cold. "I'm not my uncle, Mrs. Brennan. I don't torture people or commit murder. I simply follow the law. If the law says this land is mine, then it's mine." Colt stepped forward, his hand resting on the back of Iris's chair in silent support. "What would it take for you to sell us that deed?" Victor's smile widened. The pragmatic approach. "I appreciate that." He pulled out a document. "I've had the land appraised. Current market value is $8,000. I'm willing to sell for 10. The number hit like a physical blow. $10,000 was more than the ranch earned in 2 years. "That's extortion," Elena said flatly. "That's capitalism," Victor corrected. "The land is worth more to you than to me. Therefore, you should be willing to pay a premium." Basic economics. Iris studied the man across from her, seeing calculation, but not the sadistic cruelty that had defined his uncle. He wasn't evil. He was simply indifferent to their suffering. "In some ways, that was worse. We don't have $10,000, she said honestly. "We could maybe scrape together 5 if we sold assets and took loans. Then I suppose you'll be vacating the property." Victor stood, his lawyers rising with him. "You have 30 days. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brennan, but business is business. My uncle's crimes cost my family a fortune in legal fees and reputational damage. I'm simply recovering what I can." As Victor turned to leave, Iris made a decision that surprised even herself. "I have something else to offer," she said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. Colt's expression was confused, concerned. "I have my story," Iris continued. "The full account of what your uncle did, not just to me, but to dozens of others. Names, dates, details that never made it into the newspapers. Catherine Morrison's article was powerful, but it was just the beginning. I've spent 5 years documenting everything, interviewing other survivors, compiling evidence of the full scope of your uncle's evil." Victor's face had gone pale. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because that story is valuable. To historians, to journalists, to people who want to understand how corruption works in the territories. It's a story that would keep the Wardell name associated with crimes and cruelty for generations." Iris stood, meeting his eyes directly. "Or it could be a story that stays private. Locked away, forgotten. You're blackmailing me?" Victor's voice was sharp with disbelief. "I'm negotiating," Iris corrected, throwing his own word back at him. "You want money. I want land. You care about your family's reputation. I can either destroy it further or let it fade into obscurity. That's worth more than $10,000, wouldn't you say?" One of Victor's lawyers leaned in, whispering urgently. Victor listened, his jaw tightening, then nodded slowly. $5,000 and the complete suppression of any additional documentation about my uncle's crimes. That's my counteroffer. The land deed for the suppression of the story, Iris countered. No money. You walk away clean, your family name gradually rehabilitates itself, and we keep the land we've worked. Victor stared at her for a long moment. "You'd really do it? Publish everything?" "In a heartbeat," Iris said, and meant it. "Your uncle tried to erase me, tried to make me nothing. I survived by documenting, by making sure the truth would outlive his lies. If I have to use that truth as a weapon to protect what I've built, I will. Another whispered consultation with his lawyers. Finally, Victor nodded curtly. Fine, the deed for your silence. But I want it in writing. A legally binding agreement that you'll never publish, discuss, or distribute any information about Silas Wardle beyond what's already public knowledge. Done, Iris agreed. The contracts were drawn up over the following week. Victor Wardell signed over the contested land deed in exchange for Iris's comprehensive documentation and a legal agreement, ensuring her silence about the Wardell family's history on the day of the signing. As Victor prepared to leave the territory forever, he paused at the door. You know what's funny? He said to Iris. My uncle used to write me letters before his arrest. He talked about you, the woman who got away, the one who destroyed everything he'd built. He was obsessed with you until the day he died. Victor's expression was unreadable. I think he knew, even at the end, that you were stronger than him. That's what really killed him, not the noose, but knowing he'd lost to someone he'd tried to break. I didn't break him, Iris said softly. He broke himself. I just survived long enough to watch it happen. After Victor left, Colt found Iris in the barn, standing in front of the mural of the wild rose breaking through barbed wire. You gave up your story, he said quietly. 5 years of documentation, all those survivors' accounts. You gave it all away. I gave away the obligation to carry it, Iris corrected. The trauma, the constant reminder, the weight of being the keeper of all that darkness. I traded it for peace, for land, for the ability to move forward without Wardle's shadow following me everywhere. Do you regret it? Iris thought about it honestly. Ask me in a year. Right now, all I feel is lighter. Like I set down a burden I didn't realize I was still carrying. Colt wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back into his strength. So what now? Now? Iris smiled. Now we live. Really live, without looking over our shoulders for the next Wardell or the next threat. We raise our children. She placed his hand on her stomach, where their first child was just beginning to show. And we teach them that survival isn't the same as living, that choosing peace over revenge isn't weakness, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go. The years continued to unfold, each one adding layers to the legacy of the Brennan Ranch. Their first child, a daughter they named Rose, grew up running through the fields with Lucy's children during summer visits. Their second, a son named Samuel, after the murdered prospector whose death had started everything, learned to ride before he could properly walk. The families who'd sought refuge at the ranch became permanent fixtures, their children growing up alongside Rose and Samuel, creating a community built on second chances and mutual respect. Elena married her doctor, and they opened a clinic that served the entire region. Miguel and Thomas each purchased their own small ranches, with money earned and saved over years of faithful service. Though they remained close neighbors and friends, Catherine Morrison published 3 more books about corruption and justice in the American West, each one dedicated to the woman who taught me that surviving isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning, and Iris, the woman who'd once been branded as damaged goods, left to die in a canyon, stripped of everything except her will to live, became known throughout the territory, not for what had been done to her, but for what she'd built afterward. Schools requested her to speak to young women about resilience. Churches invited her to share her journey. Politicians sought her counsel on protecting the vulnerable. She declined most invitations, preferring the quiet work of running a ranch and raising children who would never know the terror that had once defined her life. On the 10th anniversary of Wardell's execution, a young journalist from Denver made the journey to the Brennan Ranch, hoping to interview the legendary Iris Brennan for a retrospective article. Iris met her on the porch, their porch, where so much of her new life had been built in quiet conversations and stolen moments. What do you want people to know? The journalist asked, pen poised over paper. About what you survived, about justice, about... I want them to know it doesn't define you, Iris interrupted gently. What's done to you, no matter how terrible, it doesn't define who you are unless you let it. I was branded, literally marked as property left to die. Those are facts. But they're not my identity. Then what is your identity? Iris looked out across the ranch, at the rebuilt barn with its mural, at the children playing in the yard, at Colt working with the horses in the distance, at the community they'd built from ashes and determination. I'm a wife, a mother, a rancher, a survivor who chose to build instead of destroying herself with bitterness. I'm someone who learned that forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about refusing to let that hurt define your future. She turned back to the journalist. I'm Iris Brennan, and I'm enough. I was always enough, even when someone tried to convince me otherwise. The journalist scribbled notes, then asked one final question. If you could go back and talk to yourself in that canyon, when Colt first found you and you begged him to let you die, what would you say? Iris didn't hesitate. I'd tell her to hold on, that the pain feels infinite, but it's not, that she's stronger than she knows, that there's a cowboy coming who'll see her worth even when she can't, that there's a life waiting, a beautiful, messy, wonderfully ordinary life, and all she has to do is survive long enough to reach it. She paused, feeling the weight and truth of those words, and I'd tell her that being broken isn't the end of her story. It's just the beginning. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting everything in gold and crimson one more time, Iris Hartley Brennan sat on her porch with her husband beside her, their children's laughter echoing from the barn, their community thriving around them. She had been called damaged goods. She had been branded and broken. She had begged to die in a canyon. And from all of that pain, she had built an empire of love, justice, and stubborn hope. The scar on her shoulder would never fade. Some wounds were too deep, too permanent to erase completely, but scars were proof of survival. Evidence that you'd faced something terrible and came through the other side. And as the stars emerged one by one in the vast desert sky, Iris closed her eyes and smiled. Surrounded by everything she'd fought for, everything she'd built, everything she'd become, she was more than enough. She had always been more than enough, and that truth, simple, powerful, unbreakable, was the greatest victory of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.